Thank you, Ian. And I've just put, video can be a little funky on Zoom. So I have put the link to that there if you want to file that away and save it later. So that was our first reading, the Haudenosaunee myth of Sky Woman. And this, our assigned Bible reading, it's one of the assigned readings for the day. It comes from Genesis. It's not actually the creation story, but it's a part of that story. And it starts kind of toward the end of the action. This is from Genesis 3. And it says, when the humans, there were two of them at this point, when the humans heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the evening, they hid from God's presence among the trees of the garden. God called out, "Where are you?" The man replied, "I heard you walking in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." "Who told you of nakedness?" asked God. "Have you eaten from the tree whose fruit I forbade you to eat?" The man replied, "It was the woman you put beside me. She gave me the fruit and I ate it." Then God asked the woman, "What is this that you have done?" The woman replied, the serpent tempted me, so I ate." Then God said to the snake, "Because you have done this, you are cursed. Lower than the cattle, lower than the wild beasts, you will crawl on your belly and eat dust every day of your life. I will make you enemies of one another, you and the woman, your offspring and hers. Her offspring will wound you on the head, and you will wound hers on the heel." That's where the assigned part ends. And there is more, of course, including this. God made clothes out of animal skins for the humans to wear. Then God said, "Look, these humans have become like one of us, knowing both good and evil. They must not be allowed to take in their hands the fruit from the tree of life as well, or they will eat of it and live forever." So God drove them from the Garden of Eden and sent them to till the soil from which they had been taken. This is our Bible reading, plus a little extra for this morning. The late Shel Silverstein's 1996 collection of poems for children and children at heart, that's maybe a theme this morning, begins with the title verse, "Falling Up." "I tripped on my shoelace and I fell up to the rooftops, up over the town, up past the treetops, up over the mountains, up where the colors blend into the sounds. But it got me so dizzy when I looked around, I got sick to my stomach and I threw down." I'll try not to ruin the whimsy of Silverstein's poem by turning it into some kind of academic treatise. It should be a certain kind of crime when adults, okay, mostly academic and preachery type adults, take something fun and kill it with their self-importance. No deeper moral here than a playful verse about tripping and getting disoriented. But I love the reversal of directions in it. There's a lot of falling that happens in our two readings today. Maybe you picked up on that. In the Haudenosaunee creation myth, Sky Woman falls to the lower earth, this one from the upper world. While the Hebrew creation myth in the second and third chapters of Genesis doesn't actually say anything about falling or about sin, for that matter, centuries of Christian interpretation have referred to the story as the fall, as in a fall from grace, a fall from a perfect state of union with God, the moment at which the original human beings, the ancestors of us all, threw us under the bus and over the cliff to fall into the eternal fires of perdition. Christianity is weird. Sometimes it's a good weird, and sometimes a very not good weird. The funny thing about the usual Christian interpretation of the story is that it just continues the dynamic. God says, "What have you done?" And the man says, "She made me do it, and you made me do it because you're the one who put her here with me." And the woman says, "The serpent made me do it." And centuries of Christians have said, "They made us do it." Anyhow, there's a lot of falling going on in these two readings. So I figured out that another fall wouldn't hurt, and it might as well involve falling up, even though that one is about getting disoriented. As we heard in the video, creation stories are about getting oriented. Don't read them as scientific accounts, for the love of God. They ask, who are we? What is our place in this place? How did we get to be who we are? And what does it mean that we're here? They orient us to ourselves and to our world. But when it comes to the ways that Christians have so often thought about this Hebrew creation story, it's probably helpful to get a little disoriented before we can be reoriented. This slice of the story that we've read is a climactic moment in the second of two creation stories that open up the Bible. The first one starts from a wide-angle view of nothingness and features an all-knowing God gradually bringing order to chaos, creating a world, populating it with plants and non-human animals before finally creating humans and then taking a day off. The Bible's second creation story zooms in and starts all up in the middle of things. There is an earth, but no flora or fauna yet when it starts. And God is maybe just a little bit of a bumbler. God creates the first human, whom we traditionally call Adam because of some Hebrew wordplay. God takes the soil, Adamah is the Hebrew word, and fashions it into Adam, which is the Hebrew word for human, and breathes life into it. The first human was named Human. And then God plants a garden and puts human there to take care of it. The only direction, aside from work in the garden and take care of it, is don't eat from that one tree, which is a little odd for a couple of reasons. One, because, well, temptation, and two, because by the end of the story, there's a second tree that God doesn't want human to eat from either, but God never bothers to say anything about that one. Maybe it's also worth mentioning that human was still solitary at this point. There isn't anyone else to hear this direction about not eating from the one tree, or the unspoken direction about not eating from the other one either. Eventually, God realizes that human is all alone and decides they need some company, a partner to help out in the garden, and then proceeds to make all kinds of other animals, all the different kinds of birds, the cattle, the field-dwelling animals, like some kind of strange trial and error. Is this a partner? Nope. How about this one? Nope. Okay, then maybe this one? Nope. And so on and so forth, until realizing, maybe a partner needs to be another human. Same kind of body structure and functionality, similar capacities. Maybe that'll make the most sense. And then comes the part of the story we know so well from these many centuries of retelling it. With the two humans finally present, Satan shows up and tricks the humans into sinning. Except that neither sin nor Satan are part of the story. A serpent is. And in the ancient world, or the part of the ancient world this story comes from, serpents were most often seen as symbols of fertility and wisdom. Yes, wisdom, which may be why the serpent was so keen on having the people eat from that one forbidden tree, because the serpent called it accurately. Did God say that you'd die if you ate from it? No, you won't die. If you eat from it, you'll be like God, knowing about good and evil. And so they did. And so they did. The fallout, or part of the fallout, is what we had in today's reading. The act of surviving off the land involves toil. The act of childbirth and the survival of the species involves toil. Oh, and nobody likes snakes. The humans had to leave the garden, but not as some kind of punishment for sin. That's not what the story says. They had to leave because all of a sudden it seemed like they might eat from that other important tree, the one they were never told not to eat from, the tree of life, which is kind of an odd twist, but it helps this story fit alongside other ancient stories from that part of the world that wrestle with the fact of mortality by suggesting that humans had a brief chance at immortality before God or the gods or some kind of accident kept them from it, or before they blew it. This story says God kept immortality from the humans by sending them from the garden so they wouldn't eat from the tree of life, either on purpose or by mistake. So this is the story of a trade-off. These mythic humans might have never touched the forbidden fruit and then lived out their lives and then died in a state of innocence in the garden, but that would have come at the cost of wisdom. Or, as the serpent knew, they could gain wisdom at the cost of having to move on and start taking care of themselves. In most contexts other than Christian interpretations of the first chapters of the Bible, we tend to refer to that as growing up. Maybe you're familiar with it from one side or the other of the equation. One of the basic tasks of growing up is to differentiate ourselves from our parents. How many parents have lamented their children getting more independent, even as they encourage them to do so? If we do an emotional scan of God in the story, God who feels anger at the humans because they're exercising willfulness, while at the same time pushing them out the door and giving them things they'll need in order to take care of themselves, we might recognize something like what we've come to call empty nest syndrome. With apologies to Shel Silverstein for maybe forcing a little more theology into his poem than is there, this isn't so much a story of the fall as it is a story of falling up. This is an origin story for humanity that notices there are costs that come with growing up, some pains and some blessings. In the world of the story, there was a shift in the relationship between the humans and God. There was a shift in the relationship between the humans with each other. There was a shift in the relationship between the humans and the land, between the humans and the other animals. That's a deeply important insight. Growing up involves trade-offs and costs. There is pain as well as growth. I also want to notice that if the story is about the costs that come with growth and wisdom, and the things that shift or are left behind in the process, then we should also be ready to let go of parts of the story that are no longer helpful or never were helpful, or that have turned very harmful in the ways they have been wielded, like the messages of gender and sexuality that have been weaponized, and the sense that leaving the garden and toiling to survive means that there's some sort of inherent enmity between human beings and the rest of creation that we have to dominate and extract in order to flourish. We can look to other stories too. If that seems weird to say about the Bible, that's only because we haven't taken it seriously enough. If the Bible itself starts with two different creation myths, surely we can also learn from others. The Haudenosaunee tale of Sky Woman has many variations, probably related to the fact that it lived and breathed in oral tradition that did not go through the process of canonization that the Bible did. The story could take on new shades of meaning as necessary in each retelling. But one thing that holds throughout is that during Sky Woman's slow and gentle descent from the upper realm to the lower, the animals worked together to protect her. And as the earth grew beneath her, it was clear that the relationship between humans, other animals, and the land itself is to be reciprocal. Each depends on each. This is a story worth retelling. Perhaps one thing for us to take away from this, we who are steeped in the outcome of warped readings of Genesis, is that the wisdom seeking starts in the garden, but it shouldn't end there. Leaving the garden doesn't mean being cut off forever. There is still a world to attend to and to attune to. There is wisdom to gain. Grow some herbs, feed the worms, bury your nose in lavender, and remember, we may have fallen up, but we are also still soil. and this is God's good news. Amen.